this is the first time I've seen the Neil Patrick Harris version of Great Gatsby. Well, Baz
There's a
Luhrmann's version.
Neil Patrick Harris.
Not Neil Patrick Harris. I'm sorry. Baz Luhrmann's version with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Did you just confuse Leonardo DiCaprio with Neil Patrick Harris?
Yes, because I'm thinking about, spoiler alert, something in the future that we're going to do.
Steven! That's still not something that you should be doing.
My brain, I don't know, man. I'm sorry.
They're two very distinctive people in the industry.
I know.
Even I know who they are, and that's saying something.
I just made a Freudian slip, sir. It's a Freudian slip. It happens. It happens. I don't know why my brain is stuck on NPH. I mean, I love NPH, but I don't know why my brain is stuck on NPH.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Flip the Scripts, and podcast all about adaptations. My name is Ankit Madhira.
And I'm Stephen Nieman.
And this week we are back, and we are now talking about The Great Gatsby.
The greatest, the Gatsby of the 1920s, the thing, the F Scott Fitzgerald. The only reason we're doing this is because I watched Ted. I mean, I was watching it with some friends. Shout out to Ant, Chris, and Jesse. Ant, who's a righteous listener to our podcast, he suggested Ender's Game for the last 2 weeks, so we did it for Ant. And so, yeah, shout out to them because I was watching Ted with them, and I think that's when it came up, and I was like, okay, we should do this. And it was the only reason, not because I had a hankering to read F Scott Fitzgerald again, because you have to read this in, 10th or 11th grade? I think it's 10th grade.
10th grade sounds right.
10th grade? Yeah, is it? Well, I think it's 10th grade in California. Is it 10th grade in Seattle?
Sure.
Washington?
Why not?
Okay, so it's an American classic. Let's get that out of the way. So, The Great Gatsby is by a writer named F. Scott Fitzgerald. We'll kind of dig into the book a little bit, and then we'll go into Ankit's Fun Fact Time. But it was written at a time where the great American novels were being written, and he writes it about the 1920s, the Roaring 20s, the Crazy 20s, as I like to call it. It is a time where alcohol was flowing, even though it was illegal. People were partying. It was post World War I, so it was a lot of thoughts of, and it wasn't called World War I, by the way. There's a lot of discrepancy in the book, not in the book, but in the film, because they call it World War I constantly in the film, but nobody knew there was gonna be a World War II. It was called the Great War until World War II happened. Just so everyone understands.
I don't think they ever actually say it was World War I in the movie.
They do.
They do?
They do.
Where did I miss this?
It was in the party scene.
Oh, there was chaos. I was focused on something else, probably.
Oh, no, I understand. But, it's just one of those things that, we need to understand, the time period of when this was written. This is post-World War I. It was in the Harding administration of the United States. So we're almost on the verge of the Great Depression, leading into the Roosevelt administration when he takes over in the 1930s.
Yeah, I mean, it was published April 10th of 1925. When it originally was published, it actually, many critics believed that it didn't equal F. Scott Fitzgerald's previous efforts and works with his earlier novels of This Side of Paradise and The Beautiful and Damned. So, it was actually a commercial disappointment at the time. It sold fewer than 20,000 copies by October. Yeah, so it was published in April, sold fewer than 20,000 copies in October, and actually when F. Scott Fitzgerald passed away in 1940, he believed himself to be a failure and his work was forgotten.
That's hilarious because we're forced to read it. In secondary school.
how that change came about was actually during World War II. It got a huge surge because it was one of the books on the Council on Books in Wartime distributed free copies to American soldiers that were serving overseas.
Interesting.
So that's how a lot of copies got sent, and how it really gained popularity was because it was just a free book that was just sent to soldiers overseas. They were like, all right, you need some form of entertainment. Here, read about the 20s.
Cool.
When
So,
life was fun.
as
So,
Ankit and I talked about, this is F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby. Like, there's a reason we read it. We're forced to read it. I actually really enjoyed reading it again. I thought it was a very fun book. I think that it's fun rewatching. This is the first time I've seen the Neil Patrick Harris version of Great Gatsby. Well, Baz
there's
Luhrman's
a
version.
Neil Patrick Harris.
Not Neil Patrick Harris. I'm sorry. Baz Luhrman's version with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Did you just confuse Leonardo DiCaprio with Neil Patrick Harris?
Yes, because I'm thinking about, spoiler alert, something in the future that we're going to do.
Steven! That's still not something that you should be doing.
My brain, I don't know, man. I'm sorry.
They're two very distinctive people in the industry.
I know.
Even I know who they are, and that's saying something.
I just made a Freudian slip, sir. It's a Freudian slip. It happens. It happens. I don't know why my brain is stuck on NPH. I mean, I love NPH, but I don't know why my brain is stuck on NPH.
NPH, ladies and gentlemen, is not Leonardo DiCaprio.
I know this. You know this. We know this. My brain don't know this. So
your brain decided not to brain.
My brain decided not to brain. So kind of getting back to this movie. So this is the first time I've watched the Baz Luhrmann, Leonardo DiCaprio, Great Gatsby. We were forced to watch a different version in high school. I don't know which version we watched. I'm pretty sure it was as old as the teacher I had for English. Shout out to Miss Kane, who was definitely in her 50s. So definitely was a 1960.
If I remember correctly, it was 1970s. As I was doing my research, the first big adaptation, the first official adaptation was technically 1924.
I think this came out in
1924, 1926.
I think this was the 1970s version we definitely watched. So I want to hands down say it was a 1970s version. Because, you know, back when I was in high school, I don't think this movie was out yet. Because this came out in, 2013?
2013.
Yeah, so I graduated high school in 2013.
Yeah, so that's the thing, is that I think when I read this, the movie was coming out that year.
That's cool.
And so we watched it later at the end of the year.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So Ankit, I guess I'm kind of stealing your fun fact time. Go into fun fact time, man.
Oh, I mean, I figured we were already there when I started talking about how the book got popular. But
so we're in Ankit's fun fact time. We apologize. Usually at the beginning of the podcast, we kind of say it just so everyone understands. This is an adaptation podcast. Ankit and I are going to talk about the adaptation of The Great Gatsby. We're going to talk about book to film, and we're focusing on the Baz Luhrmann one, the Leonardo DiCaprio film of 2013. But we're in Ankit's fun fact time, which Ankit gives a bunch of fun facts, like he did, like we talked about, I talked about. So
continuing on with that in terms of the book, right? So that sending it overseas during World War II is what had, the popularity surge once again. And then people were like, maybe we should look at this more critically and scholarly and re-examine the work. And then it became a core very quickly after that of the American high school curricula, as we have been mentioning, and a part of American popular culture. And it is considered one of the great American novels. Now,
and
if anyone is curious,
if you don't like this book and you didn't like the movie, well, I'm sorry that it became that.
Yeah,
I know a lot of people in my high school do not like the book. They did not like it.
I did not like the book in high school. I didn't love it when I reread it for this. Right, I'll be the first to say that. But I appreciated it more, because my complaint with the way that the high school curricula works, at least in my experience, is that you have to overanalyze every little detail of the book.
What does the green light mean? What do the eyes mean? What do the field of ashes mean? Yeah. I know exactly what you mean, Ankit.
And I have a feeling, listeners, let us know in the comments if you also potentially feel this way. I just felt like there was too much over-analysis to where it was like, hey, like, I understand analyzing a bit, right? And understanding and, analyzing it. But, like, it just felt like we had to over-analyze everything. Like, we keep coming back to this, but I don't remember which author it is. I need to figure out who this author is. But, like, someone was analyzing their book and it's like, oh, what did the blue curtain signify? And they're like, oh, well, he was sad and upset. And so the blue curtains signify what he looks like, right? And then there's like a quote from the author in like an interview that's just going, no, I needed colors for the curtains. I looked up. I had blue curtains in my apartment, so they became blue.
Blue curtain. I don't know what book is it.
I don't know what book this is, or like it's something like that, right? I don't remember exactly.
A wallflower. I mean,
maybe that might be it.
Love that book. I mean, we could do book to film for that,
right? But like that's what I'm saying, right? Like sometimes it's just like no. Sometimes the author just needed something, and then they look up, they get inspiration, and they're like, great, perfect, like done. I'm not thinking more about this.
I will say in the 1920s there was this movement in literature, and I think why people do that, and I understand in the high school environment we kind of have to do that, but there was this big symbolism movement in literature in the 1920s and earlier, especially post World War I, post the Great War. And it's very imbalanced of what theater did as well. So in drama, post the Great War, a lot of theater started to do symbolism because they felt like life was a little meaningless after the whole world kind of fought each other for that long. And then when World War II happens, that's when the absurdism movement comes in. So you go from this very symbolic movement that's still in this naturalistic state. It's why when you read Doll's House by Ibsen, you get this, it is Doll's House. But there's some symbolism in that. There's symbolism in all of the Chekhov plays. That's post-World War I. There's a bunch of symbolism in a lot of the modernist, if you will. What we would call the modern playwrights of America, such as August Wilson, Tennessee Williams, a lot of symbolism in their plays. So it was really interesting. Like post Great War, symbolism became like the high American art, which is probably why we really dig into Great Gatsby. And then post World War II, absurdism became like this European thing, and we were very anti absurdism until probably the modern era.
Yeah. And like you're saying, like I understand, probably why we pick so much at Great Gatsby, because it does do a really good job of showing off the symbols and the symbolism of the era and the art of the era. And like it does a really good job of that. It just felt like in my experience, it was like we did that, but then we did that even deeper when we were like, all right, we've already done it. And now we have to write a 5-page essay of what a green light symbolizes. Like, just extensive that. Anyway, if anyone is curious on what the great American novels are, usually it refers to these following books, and they are Moby Dick. Oh yeah, you can guess them. Go for it. There are Moby 1, Dick? 2, 3. Well, I started saying that one. There are 4, and one is Great Gatsby. One is Moby Dick.
Gone with the Wind?
That's one of the other ones. There is one more.
One
that
more.
Is, at least on this list that I'm looking at.
To Kill a Mockingbird.
No.
Really? Okay.
I will give you the release date. Later. I will give you the release date. 1884.
Okay. 1884? Is it? No.
Is it what?
Ooh. It's a play.
Is it
it's
what?
A play? It's a play?
No. It's a novel.
Has it been turned into a play, though? Are you giving me a hint?
Not to the extent of my knowledge.
Oh, okay. It's a novel, but it's never been turned into a play.
There's probably a film adaptation that I just don't know about.
12 Angry Jurors? I don't know. Give it to me.
Twain.
Mark Twain?
Yeah.
Wait, is it just called?
No, that's the hint. It's Twain.
Oh, Tom Sawyer.
No, it's the other one.
Oh, I'm never going back to Missouri. What's his name?
Adventures of Huckleberry Finn.
Yeah, Huckleberry Finn. Well, no, there is a play adaptation of that. It's called Big River.
Sure, I didn't know this.
No, but Big River is Huckleberry Finn and Jim on the river.
You're asking the wrong person about this, dude.
Okay,
I literally have another show about me not knowing things.
Yes, but Huck Finn, yeah, okay, great. Well, because when you say Twain, I think Sawyer. I think Tom Sawyer.
A lot of people do.
Also, because Huckleberry Finn is Tom Sawyer's best friend in the novel of Tom Sawyer.
Yeah.
For those who don't know.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Anyway, let's finally talk about this 2013 film adaptation that Baz Luhrman. Words are hard. Names are harder.
Names are hard. He made fun of me for. Well, I mean, mine was really bad. Never mind. I can't argue it. Yes, Baz Luhrman.
You completely changed who somebody was. I just struggled on the pronunciation of Baz's last name.
Baz Luhrmann, who has, side note, worked with Leonardo DiCaprio before in what film, Ankit? It's another adaptation.
I should know this fact?
Yes.
I don't know.
It's a Shakespeare.
Did he do the Romeo and Juliet?
He did the Romeo and Juliet with guns, with Leonardo DiCaprio as Romeo.
Cool.
So they have worked together before. So this isn't the first time the director and actor have worked together. Now, keep in mind, Leonardo DiCaprio was way younger. They did that.
Just slightly.
Slightly younger.
Cool. So the film came out in 2013, May 1st. In New York was the premiere, and then it released globally May 10th of 2013. And the budget was $105 million. Do you want to take a guess at what the box office was?
Well, I know that it got a SAG award because it got SAG nominated because my dad got the SAG extra. Like he got to get the SAG. My dad gets a bunch of free movies every year.
I'll give you a hint. They made their money back.
Yeah. I was gonna say what? So they spent 1.5 mil. Made about 3 mil.
No, not 1.5. They spent 105.
Oh, 105. 300 mil.
Pretty close. 353.6 million.
Ah, not bad.
Yeah,
so they made their money back and then some.
Pretty good. You're within 100 million.
That's better than normal. That's better than normal.
Yeah. So, the Rotten Tomatoes score, the tomato meter had a 48%.
Ooh, audience
so that
or
is
critic?
That is critics is 48%.
Oh.
And audience score was 67%.
Really?
Yeah. Now heading over to The Great Gatsby on IMDb, it was rated a 7.2 out of 10. It also did have 86 nominations and 51 wins across those nominations, including 2 Academy Awards. So it won the Best Achievement in Costume Design at the 2014 Oscars, and it won Best Achievement in Production Design at the 2014 Oscars, which were both of the categories that it was nominated for.
I think just to prove a point, just because something is nominated doesn't mean it's a good film.
No, that's fair. I'm just pointing out what it did. But I do think that the costume design was very well done in this film.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm not going to argue with the costume design. I think the costume design is probably one of the best elements of the film.
Yeah. Like, if this film got nominated for Best Picture, then I would have been like, okay, thoughts.
Well, it did get nominated for SAG Best Picture because my dad gets all for SAG, he gets anything gets nominated for SAG, my dad will get the what's that called? He'll get a copy of the DVD sent to our house to watch it, to vote on. Okay. There's a term for it.
Sure.
But you have to break them after you watch it because those you're not allowed to keep them.
Fair enough.
They're not official copies.
Yeah.
So
cool. That's all the fun facts I have.
Ankit's fun fact time. So
we should
now
jump
it's time
into
for
it.
Stephen's.
It's been about 20 minutes.
Before we hop into the book, the meat of our journey, if you will, the adaptation, I kind of just give a little summary of what this book is about. So this book is about our main character named Nick, not the Gatsby. You would think Nick Gatsby would be our main character. Nope, it's just Nick. So Nick is a guy who lives in New York, in Long Island, and he lives next door to Gatsby. And it's all about how he gets kind of wrapped into Gatsby's love affair with his cousin Daisy. And stuff happens and things happen, and it's all about who is Gatsby, why does he do what he does, and American culture in the 1920s.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Do we want to jump into it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, let's jump in. So, cool. Movie opens up in a wonderful sea of weirdness. No, just kidding. It has the Warner Brothers logo, and you see all that fun stuff. And you see a shining green light. And it just keeps shining. And you're like, okay. Now, then, which is seen from Gatsby's house. So they're already showing that you can see the green light from Gatsby's house. And they make it very clear in the first bit of the movie. Now, this isn't revealed in the book for a while. I think it makes a more interesting reveal later, but it's fine.
It's fine.
I'm not too upset.
The other thing is that, like, we have to remember this is all from Nick's point of view.
Yes, the whole book is from Nick's point of view. I would say the movie plays with that a lot.
Yes.
So the opening narration is the beginning of the book. It is like word for word salad the book. And I was like, hey, this is I am I tired of that? I have to really ask myself that. We've seen a lot of adaptations, man. How many adaptations have we seen that have started with opening narration that is literally the beginning of the book? I feel like 3 of our adaptations have done that so far.
We've seen quite a few. Now, here's the thing, is it always gives me hope. And then my hope and dreams are crushed. So let's see how this goes.
My question is, does it work? Like, okay, because you and I had talked about wanting to do our own adaptation one day. Does it work? Does it actually achieve what the writers think it achieves? Because you're right, it does give us hope that they're going to follow the adaptation. But at the same time, is it telling us more than showing us? And is it more interesting to see in a film aspect?
I think in a film like this, it makes sense.
Okay.
Other films, it doesn't necessarily work, maybe. Right? I don't think it worked as well in Ender's Game because it was just title cards.
I agree.
Right?
And, again, at least it's not opening crawl narration that we've seen in almost every adaptation.
In this film, it is legitimately Nick, because like it starts as a voiceover and then we get into the scene, but it's just Nick describing this to his doctor.
Yeah, so that's where I get to a really big issue. So it opens with the narration and we get to this doctor's office, and he seems like he's in a psychologist's office or a psychiatry. I don't know which one.
I just figured it was a therapist.
Well, is there a difference between therapist and psychologist?
I think so. I don't know what it is.
Okay, I apologize.
You keep talking.
For people.
I'll look some up. I'll look up
No,
some stuff.
I mean, if there is a physical difference, I apologize to people for not knowing. If like a psychiatrist is your job and you hate therapists, wait. I think the difference is one can prescribe drugs, the other can't.
Maybe. Okay.
If I
the main difference between psychiatrists and therapists
is like a PhD, where the therapist is somebody who.
I looked it up. You were right. So psychiatrists are medical doctors, while therapists are not.
And this guy was wearing a doctor's coat, so he's a psychiatrist, not a therapist.
Okay.
But this is where I have my first problem with the film, was they've now given a reason to the narration. In the book, there was no need to give a reason. It felt like this is a story we're being told. We don't need to be told. We don't need to he's in a therapist's office, in a psychologist's office. Like, it just didn't feel like it was necessary. I was like,
yeah. In the book, it just felt like Nick was writing the book, and we were just reading a book that Nick was writing.
Yeah, and then he talks about Gatsby, and he talks about how amazing this Gatsby is, and I was like, Gatsby isn't mentioned by Nick in the first chapter alone, let alone mentioned by Nick until chapter 2, 3.
Yeah, it was just the mysterious neighbor. But
yeah,
small minor things. I think they did a good job in terms of everything was there. Also understanding you need to maybe drop Gatsby in there for the audience to know. I mean, I would have enjoyed it if they left the mystery. Like, you could have just left the mystery of it.
I think
It's
the
fine.
mystery of Gatsby is so much more palpable.
Hmm.
And we'll talk about that palpability as we get through the rest of the adaptation. But I think it's missing that palpability.
Yeah.
So we cut to 1922 Asteria, and we see the crazy island, Long Island, if you will. Now, Nick talks about why he's there. He's like, I went there for Wall Street, and all of a sudden it's Wall Street and it's modern music. And this is where I get my biggest adaptation blunder of the whole thing. I get it. It's a Baz Luhrmann thing. I really do. It's a Baz Luhrmann thing.
Is it? Okay.
It is. He does it in Romeo and Juliet. He modernized it. He added guns instead of swords, and just does he'll keep the historical potency of the script, but he'll add modernistic sensibility to moments of aesthetic. Does that make sense? That's
yeah, it does. See, I think because I also was like, why are we having Crazy in Love by Beyonce play at one point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we having these pop songs and R&B songs and stuff from the 2000s playing? So I think I would have preferred it if he still did that, but they were instrumental versions, right? So it wasn't as clear that it was, hey, this is the pop song that we're doing, just in a different style, obviously. They changed up the style, they changed up all of that, sure. I think I would have preferred it if he still did that, it was just instrumental stuff behind it rather than you have the vocals coming through.
I agree. I also disagree. I think what the music does is it dates the movie instantly.
Mm-hmm.
Now when I watch the film, we're in 2024. I can go, oh, this was made in 2013. There are music choices of this movie that I'm like, oh yeah, this was made
right
in the last decade.
And that's why I'm saying okay, hey, if they wanted to do that, but they used instrumental versions that weren't necessarily as clear of what the song might have been, because if you listen to some of the music that's in there, they do change it up. It's not it's the same. I'm using Crazy in Love as the example, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just one that was ingrained into my head, and I was like, why is Beyonce playing at this moment? It happens later in the film, but I was like, Beyonce 1920s, okay. And they did kind of take the song and then 1920s it, and they swung it and all of that, right? And they added more jazz elements to the song itself. But I think if they took out the lyrics and just, did that, and wherever the lyrics were meant to be, it was a saxophone or a trumpet. And it was just more of a jazz rendition of the song, where if you don't know the song already, it's not one that's going to pop out at you, right?
Okay. I just think it clashes with the movie. And it's a Baz Luhrmann thing. It's very Baz Luhrmann. So he lives in West Egg in Long Island. Now, West Egg is a very popping area because a lot of new people have moved into West Egg because they're trying to make it big in New York City. Wall Street is booming, as it says in the movie. So it cuts back to the psychiatrist. And again, I said, it's weird having him give this all to a psychiatrist. I don't find it fascinating. Maybe the trope to me is played out. I feel like I've seen it in almost every film recently, where it's when it's a backstory movie, they're always talking to a psychiatrist. And I'm like,
yeah,
or a therapist. And I feel like it's such a boring trope.
But I think this might have been the beginning point of that trope.
Maybe? I think it happened before. This is 2013, buddy. I think that trope has been played for a while.
Sure. I've seen it more in recent films than I have in older films. But then again, I don't watch a ton of films.
So then he talks about that it all started when he went to go visit his cousin, Daisy. And she lives in East Egg. And we go to Daisy's house. And first of all, I just want to compliment Daisy's house. Holy crap.
Yeah. Not what I expected when I read the book, and then I saw it and I was like, oh.
They didn't really. The thing about the book, the film adaptation, is you read the book and you don't really understand how Daisy and Tom are affluent or rich, you watch the movie and you're like, oh yeah, they are rich and affluent. Like you don't realize it. But I do have one issue with Daisy's house being so amazing.
It makes Gatsby's less amazing.
Yes, that is it. That is literally my one issue. I was like, Gatsby's house has to one up everything. Like you have to make Gatsby's house the most amazing thing ever, and I don't think it does in this film. It's surprisingly, it's beautiful. I love it. Like, don't get me wrong. Don't hate me for this, but I don't think it one ups it.
I think it's on an even playing ground.
Even, but Gatsby's house to me is supposed to be that much higher.
Right, like Gatsby's is supposed to be a one-up, but I think in the film they're even.
Yeah, she's married to Tom Buchanan, which, side note, I didn't get the joke when I read the novel. When I watched the film, it hit me like a brick.
There's a joke?
He's related to a president. He's a Buchanan.
Which one?
Buchanan, the president.
No, I'm blanking, but like when
15th president of the United States.
Oh! That one, the one before Lincoln.
The one before Lincoln.
Oh.
Or is it Van Buren? Van Buren and Buchanan always get mixed up, but they're both in that like era.
James Buchanan.
Buchanan was a president.
James Buchanan was the 15th president of the United States.
And caused the Civil War, yeah.
That explains Tom's reasoning of certain things. You want to talk about that?
There you go. I mean, it just made it like it literally hit me like a brick. I was watching the movie and I was like, oh my gosh, it's Tom Buchanan, because Buchanan is like, because they talk about him having like a rich family history, and that hit me like a brick when I was watching the film. Did it hit me? Whenever I read the book, it never hit me.
It hit me now when you explained it.
Maybe it's my history brain. I don't know. It's always on, man.
That's fair. Cool. But yeah, like, for context, ladies and gentlemen, if no one has read the book or seen the film, they are like old money rich. Like, they had money when the American Revolution was happening. Rich.
So we're going to skip ahead a bit because, as Ankit and I talked about before we even hopped on this recording, mind you, that a lot of the book and the movie are exactly the same. Like, you literally can read the book and watch the movie, and you'll experience basically the same thing in perpetuity. But we're going to talk about the scene as a makeup and say, did it make it make sense? So the next few bits as follows. So, Ankit, I'm just going to rapid fire.
Okay.
If you're okay with that.
Sounds good.
So Tom does this whole sports thing. It's really fun. I love Tom. I actually really enjoyed the whole sport, how they introduced him as a sports guy. I thought it was really fun. And then they hop into the windy room. And this is where like you really saw Baz Luhrmann's aesthetic with like the windows and everything blowing, and all the women are like luxurious and beautiful. And you meet Daisy and you also meet Jordan, and you're like, yay, the people we're supposed to care about. So that all happens, and then they have dinner. Now, a couple of things to note, because it might come up later as we talk about it. At dinner, they talk about nothing. This is the thing about this is the point about the book, and I think they do it really well in the film. It's a lot of talking nothing. Everything in all the dialogue, all the stuff, it's supposed to be nonsensical, because back then in the 20s, what was bigger than war? That was supposed to be like the feeling of it. Like, after a great war, after a world war, what could be bigger?
Nothing.
The only thing that is mentioned in that section that I think is really, really important is the first mention of Gatsby's name by Jordan. In the book, not in the film. Now, this is where I argue against them mentioning Gatsby's name earlier, because I think it's really cool when Jordan is the first one to mention Gatsby, because then you get Nick going, oh yeah, that's my neighbor.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, like, they do still keep that in because they never mentioned that Gatsby was a neighbor earlier, right? And so Nick never mentions earlier that Gatsby was his neighbor. So like you do still get that moment, but I see where you're coming from of like it would be fun if they just didn't explain it. But so be it.
Yeah. So then they're at dinner and they're having dinner and they get a phone call and Tom leaves. Tom also has like a racist rant in the middle of this, by the way, as well. This is the only time I think he has a racist rant in the book.
No, he has one at the other point that you're thinking of as well.
Oh, he does. You're right. Sorry. He has a racist rant here, but he talks about how we white people, and I'm going to quote him, and I should.
No, you're down the slippery slope. Go for it.
Okay. So he quoted Goddard.
Goddard.
What was the name of the author that he quoted?
Goddard. That sounds right.
It was an author who wrote at the time, he was like, the white people have to be supremacist over all the people in America who are not white, basically. And Tom really believed in it. And in the 1920s, this is post-Civil War, pre-World War II, so there was no, and of course, pre-Civil Rights movement in the 1960s. So it was still very segregationist, even in New York.
Yeah.
And Tom is that rich a-hole who is a white supremacist.
Woohoo!
Of the Buchanan name of the Southern Democrats.
Yay.
We'll talk more about that later. And basically gets a phone call in the middle of dinner, in the middle of his racist comment, racist tirade, as I like to call it. And it's his mistress who he's cheating on Daisy with. And this is the first moment of in the book and in the film I'm going, wow, you cheat on that? You like, you're that kind of stupid rich, aren't you?
Oh, he very stupid rich.
Nick learns Tom is cheating, and he then has a kind of heart-to-heart with Daisy about her daughter. And yes, Daisy and Tom have a daughter. That's a really important plot point.
Who we only see at the very end of the film.
Yeah, in the book we see her midway.
We see her one time in the book as well. It's just in the middle.
Yeah, it's a very weird. They do a lot. It's fun. So that is all of chapter 1 in a nutshell. They did a pretty good job. What do you think of chapter 1 film-wise, Ankit? Any problems so far?
None. I thought it was great. I think they did a really nice job introducing the girls. Like, you get the whole suave, beautiful elegance that you're supposed to have when you think about Jordan and when you think about Daisy. One thing that I didn't catch in the book that I found interesting was that Nick does know Tom from their Yale days together.
Yes. And that was something that I never caught as well. So
yeah. And maybe that was an addition, but if that was an addition, it's an addition that I'm very okay with. So,
well, just also on another note, they did chapter 1 really well. I think my only issue with so far is the houses. The house of Tom is way too cool.
I think, I agree with that. Like, I think, and we can talk about it when we see Gatsby's house properly.
Yeah.
I think, like, Tom's house is really nice. I do kind of prefer Gatsby's house, but I don't think that it is so much better than Tom's, like I imagined it in the book.
Yeah, so then we use the green light. It feels like,
oh, okay, it's just two different architects built big mansions.
Yeah, so then we use the green light to transition back to the other side of the river, to West Egg, and we see the silhouette of Gatsby looking over at the green light.
Yay! And on that note, we should take a snack break.
I was about to say that. Hey, snack break, everyone.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the snack break. I hope you are all enjoying this episode of Flip the Scripts. If you are enjoying this episode, please make sure to hit that subscribe button on YouTube, hit that like button. It really does help us out. And if you're listening on any of the podcast apps like Spotify, Apple Podcast, anything like that, be sure to hit that follow button. Leave a rating or review. That really helps us out a lot. And thank you so much to anyone who has already done this. Thank you to anyone who will do this in the future. It really, really does help us out a lot. Now, if you would like to gain access to some bonus content, you can do so by heading over to patreon.com/coopforge. And speaking of patrons, I want to give a big shout out to Lucy Sadler, who increased her patronage to the production manager level. Lucy, thank you so much. It really means the world to us. And thanks to you, we're able to do bigger and better things, hopefully, that you, the listeners, will enjoy. So, listeners, if you sign up for the Patreon, you get access to different types of bonus content, like access to our notes, access to some bonus videos, bonus audios, different things like that. You also get access to everything from all three shows hosted here on Co-op Forge. So not only do you get content from Flip the Scripts, you also get it from Post Finale and Seattle Across the Pond. So again, if you want to sign up, it is patreon.com/coopforge. So patreon.com/CO_OPFORGE. Now, if you want to help out the show in a non-monetary way, that's great as well. Thank you so much. The best way to help grow the show is just reach out to a friend and tell them about the show. Word of mouth is a fantastic way to grow the show, and it really does help us out. Just reach out and be like, hey, you love books, or hey, you love movies. There's this show called Flip the Scripts. It's new, it's fun. The hosts are really funny, they're silly, they get into arguments sometimes, but at the end of the day, they're taking a look at adaptations and all types of adaptations. It really does help us out, and thank you to anyone who has done this already, who will do this in the future. And also be sure to follow us on social media. You can follow Flip the Scripts at Flip the Scripts Pod on Instagram and Facebook, and you can also follow Co-op Forge, which we post content from all the shows here on Co-op Forge on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, and that's at Co-op Forge, so that's CO_OPFORGE. It really does mean a lot that you are all listening to this episode, so let's get back into it.
We're back from the snack break, everyone. Ha ha ha. So, we're back in the psychiatrist's office, and now Nick is being told to write everything down. And I went, what are they trying to make him F Scott Fitzgerald? And yes, that is exactly what they're doing.
But like, for me, when I read the book, I kind of felt like I was just reading something that Nick like was writing.
I like that it feels like that. I don't like to be told it feels like that. Does that make sense?
I would have preferred if just from the beginning he wasn't in a psychiatrist's office or anything, and it was just, you know, he had his narration and we just see that he's just writing.
It could have been interesting if he was writing it in Gatsby's house, post the moment that I'm thinking of, and you know what I'm talking about. And for people who haven't read the book or watched the movie, you'll understand.
Next week.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
post the thing.
I think that could have been interesting, but it also did feel like he was separated from it.
Yeah.
So I think it does make sense that it wasn't being written past, like, directly after that moment.
Fair. So, in Chapter 2, we are traveling into the Valley of Ashes. Now, the Valley of Ashes is an open wasteland between Long Island and Manhattan in the book. And I believe this place actually did exist. If you've watched West Side Story, both versions, the new Spielberg one as well, it's where the Jets and the Sharks are.
Okay.
A lot of the Puerto Rican workers had to work there, and a lot of basically anybody who was a person of color was forced to work in that area, or who was poor. So a lot of the poor white people, a lot of the poor Irish immigrants were working there. A lot of the poor, any immigrant was basically worked there in New York.
Yeah. It doesn't look like it was an official place. Like, it was never officially called that, but the term was coined from the book of The Great Gatsby.
Yeah, and the Valley of Ashes, you know, like, it's very biblical. For those who don't know of the Torah or the Tanakh, it's very biblical to talk about the Valley of Ashes or Valley of Death.
Okay.
It's a biblical thing.
Yeah.
And also because church was a big thing in F. Scott Fitzgerald's time.
Right.
So there's also these big eyes that are watching over the Valley of Ashes, and it's, very biblical. Like, God is watching over
And
everyone.
That's actually a really cool point, because that is from the original dust cover. and the first edition. Like, it didn't have the spectacles,
Yeah.
but it had those eyes, right? And he wanted to, try to figure out what the name of the book was, and he was having a long time like struggling with the name of the book. But then there's a artist, Francis Cugat, I believe is how it is pronounced. I might be wrong. But his work of the celestial eyes is what impressed Fitzgerald, and so that's how that imagery came
Nice.
into the novel, and that's what became that, and then that's what that poster board in the Valley of Ashes in the film is referring to, is the celestial eyes.
So Tom and Nick are on the train in the middle of Valley of Ashes. They hop off the train and they go to Wilson's garage. Now Wilson is a straight up character. He works in a garage. He fixes cars. He's trying to buy Tom's car. And Wilson has a wife named Myrtle. Myrtle Wilson. Keep in mind Wilson is their last name. So Myrtle Wilson is also Tom's mistress. So we've now met Tom's number 2. So he has Daisy and he has Myrtle. Both are really important to the plot.
Just slightly.
He's like, let's go out. Let's go have some fun with Catherine and let's go hang out. So they all go to New York. Not Wilson, because Wilson works in the garage and he's not going to bring his mistress's husband along. So Nick gets left with the dog while they fornicate, and I thought this was really funny, but also not necessarily in the book, but I also thought it was really funny.
I didn't mind it because I loved him just sitting there and being like, what do I do with this puppy?
Yeah. The puppy is a gift that she gets in the novel. It's not really clear it's given to her, but in the novel, she's actually given the puppy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, she does have a line, like, can we get the dog? And he's just like, oh, whatever you want. So.
No, I know the line is said, but like it's a lot more clear, of course, in the book.
Yeah.
Wanted to make that.
You see the transaction of acquiring the puppy in the book.
Then Catherine and a bunch of other McKees start showing up, and they have a huge party, and Nick gets drunk for the second time in his life.
Woo!
And I love this. It's a really cool scene. Now it's a lot different. It's a bit different than the book. I think the party feels very like stagnant. It doesn't feel like it's like it feels so the party feels so modern in the film version of it, and I think compared to the book where it actually feels like a classic party where it's like people are interacting with each other, the movie just feels like an orgy or like the starting of one with a cool fugue going on outside. There's a really cool fugue.
Yeah, the music in this scene, incredible.
Like, for those who don't know what a fugue is, because some people aren't musically trained, a fugue is a instrumentation usually performed on a horn or a trumpet or a saxophone that causes ethereal. It's like an ethereal notage, isn't it? Like something like that. Like there's a cool play called The Soldier's Fugue, and that's what I always think of when I hear a fugue. I'm like, it's just so well done. Like the fugue outside during the whole drunk scene is just like, it's beautiful.
It's so good.
It tells me I put them in Harlem of New York. I know it doesn't like give a specific borough, but I put the apartment in Harlem because it's just that sound, that feeling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, like Harlem is very famous for the jazz that came out of it and the music that came out of it in the 1920s. So, like, that's completely fair. Yeah.
And the only thing I have an issue, of course, like the only thing I have an issue of the scene is like I feel like the party is boring. It's not boring. It's a bit like orgy-esque where like the music is really interesting, but then like it doesn't. I think the book is more calculated and more interesting to read at that point. I don't know.
Yeah, I think. Though what they did do a good job of is showing, because I think like it is a little more calculated in the book, and maybe it's just that F Scott Fitzgerald didn't want to describe it as grandiose because he wanted Gatsby's party, spoiler alert, we have a party at Gatsby's, Gatsby's party to be even grander.
I think that's one of the things that I keep running into, Ankit. I mean, like we're gonna get to Gatsby's party in like the next chapter, because chapter 3 is Gatsby's party, and we're in chapter 2. But my thing is like Baz Luhrmann, as a director, and I know he does this, and I always feel like he does this. He shoots his load before it even gets there.
Fair.
Pardon my French.
I think, like, he could have toned it down just a little bit. I agree, right? But I do think he still did a good job of showing, like, how the 1920s, like, there were parties all the time, right? Even small gatherings were parties, but I do understand where you're coming from. It just felt a little orgy-esque.
Yeah. So they keep quoting the book, and the book keeps getting quoted, and the party ends in both the same way, where where Myrtle keeps saying Daisy's name, and Tom's like, "Don't say Daisy's name," and he smacks the crap out of her. The
And
thing
Nick's
is,
just like, I don't need to get involved.
yeah, Nick leaves with McGee, which they don't show. Unfortunately, they don't show it in the film. They're like, he just ends up at home again. I'm like, no, there's a whole escape thing. I really love the whole escape thing that they have in the book. I was sad I didn't get to see that,
That's fine.
but it's fine. But the party ends, yeah, when she gets slapped, and to me, like, the book was like, like, I read that moment in the book. It was so impactful. It wasn't impactful in the film. The slap wasn't earned.
Sure.
It just kind of felt like it came out of everything was happening.
There was too much chaos before the slap happened.
Exactly.
Like, that's the thing, is there was too much happening before the slap. Whereas, like, if you had a lot and it was like, all right, the party was starting to die down and then slap, great. But, like, you need the lull before you jump again.
And the rhythm was not there. So, and then what I said was, what, are all the chapters going to end with the psychologist? Because we hop back to the psychologist again. And I know it doesn't. I just said that was what was happening, it felt like, before we jumped to a new chapter. So for those who, like, read the book religiously, they do chapter end in a lot in the film, and it just kind of feels very fragrant, if you will. We've watched a couple of the adaptations where they've done this, where they've kind of put, like, a lot of chapter ends, but I never feel like it works, because it just, like, if I'm going to read chapters, then I'm going to go read the book.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, chapter 3, I title it Gatsby's Party. Yeah, we're here.
Fair enough.
We're here, Ankit.
Woo!
So,
we're at the castle.
Yeah, so Nick is the only person to actually get a physical invitation to Gatsby's party. So Gatsby just throws parties, and Nick is the only one to get an actual invitation to his party.
Which I find
love
hilarious.
This. I love this because the only reason he throws parties is for one person to show up. Spoiler alert, she never does come to the parties. But Nick is a special circumstance, so he's invited to the parties.
Yeah.
So,
one, he's a special circumstance, and two, I feel like Gatsby's like, he's my neighbor, and he hasn't wandered in yet. Maybe I should tell him to show up.
Yeah, so they all go into the party. Everyone's having a crazy time. It's a bunch of people. It looks really fun. And they open the doors, and I'm like, oh god, it's Moulin Rouge in his house.
I've never seen Moulin Rouge.
Just so you know, oh god, Ankit. I mean, no, you don't need to watch it. It's fine.
Oh,
no,
okay.
this is one of the movies I'm telling you don't add it to your list.
Okay.
Just so you all know, Moulin Rouge is another Baz Luhrmann film.
Sure.
And I just feel like he just put another one of his films in his film.
Is that a bad thing? Is that a good thing? Oh, it's a bad thing.
I think it's a bad thing. I think it's just pandering.
Oh, okay.
I think it's lazy.
Sure. I haven't seen Moulin Rouge, so like this was fun. This was fantastical.
Yeah. And then they introduced like the prodigy of Beethoven playing piano, and then I'm like, yay, more modern music. Woohoo.
Why couldn't it just be 1920s jazz? There's so much good 1920s jazz.
I don't know. And then we run into Jordan again, and like I was like, hey, I like the character of Jordan in the film. I think she does a really good job. I think the actor's doing a great job. I think, let's talk about casting really quick. Before we continue, let's talk about the casting really quick.
Cool.
I think the casting has been spot on in this film so far.
I think it was really good. I really like the casting. Actually, one of the like remarks that I read in terms of the critical response was against Tobey Maguire
Mm.
in this. Um
Was this his like next film after Spider-Man? Like
I don't think it was his next film after Spider-Man. I just think like it was his next big film.
because Spider-Man 3 was 08, right?
Yeah, I think this was like his next big film
Yeah.
after Spider-Man.
Was Spider-Man 3 08? Was I in middle school when Spider-Man 3 came out?
I don't
Oh,
remember.
God. You have the computer in front of you. I'm just gonna...
Fine, okay, give me a second.
So I'll keep talking while Ankit looks into that. So it's a really interesting party and everyone's having fun. But again, like Ankit and I talked about, Gatsby's house is incredible, but it doesn't topple over Daisy's house like it does in the book, where Gatsby's house feels like Willy Wonka's house and Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and Daisy's house should just feel like an amazing mansion, where like it could have been this explode. Like Baz Luhrman's so creative. I'm so shocked that the mansion and the manor, Gatsby's manor and Daisy's mansion, are so similar.
Yeah,
in the sense
I think what would have made Daisy's mansion just feel less grandiose is not having the amazing front lawn.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful.
That's all you needed, right? The house can be the same size. All of that, right? You can still have all the servants, but having that beautiful curated front lawn is what just puts it over the top for me.
Fair. I mean, that's a really good point. I like what you're saying.
Spider-Man 3 came out in 2007. And
it was close.
What the critic was saying, right, is that Tobey Maguire, in his usual recessive presence, barely registering as either a dynamic part of the events as he describes or their watchful witness, which I disagree with, because I think he like truly did understand the character of Nick.
Yeah, I don't think he's a bad cast for Nick. I think he's actually quite a good cast for Nick, because Nick is not a character. I think that's kind of like the problem with adapting Great Gatsby, is if we look at it as it is Gatsby's the character, Daisy's the character, the Wilsons are characters, Tom is a character, Nick is the narrator. And I think it's really hard to play a narrator. I mean, like, when you read anything and there's a narrator in this throughout the whole story, it's really hard to create a character for that person. I mean, take Daniel Radcliffe and Harry Potter. That had to be the hardest thing for a 11-year-old kid to do, because Harry Potter, I mean, he does have a lot of like character.
There's a third-person narrator though in Harry Potter.
I mean, most of the time you read it, you do feel like Harry Potter. You do read it through his eyes.
Yeah, like it's biased that way, but like it is still a third-person narrative. It's not like it's Percy Jackson where it's first-person narrative, right?
Okay.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Katniss Everdeen's a better example.
Yes.
We've talked about it on the podcast. Katniss Everdeen, it's first person almost all the way through the whole series, and
it's difficult.
It's really challenging. Like, she's a really good actor. Like, I mean, heck, like a lot of people complained about her acting in that movie. They said it was wooden. But like, her acting in that movie is probably the most book accurate thing anybody's ever seen.
I blame the writing in that movie more than the acting in that movie.
I agree. And I think, again, Tobey Maguire is playing the hardest role in this whole film, the narrator, the character without character.
But I think he does a really good job, because what you kind of get out of the book is like Tobey Maguire's character of Nick. He is just a person who has been plucked up from the Midwest, plopped into New York, into this crazy summer with these crazy people, and then just picked up and moved again. Right? Like, that's all he is. He's just like someone that's not associated with these people. He's just brought in, he's plopped down, he witnesses some stuff, and then he leaves. Right? So, like, I think he does a really good job, because at no point in the film did I feel like, oh, Nick's becoming too big of a character. It still just felt like, oh, Nick's just caught up in this world.
Yeah.
Like, he's just stuck here, even though he might not want to be.
So Nick gets obsessively drunk at this party, and that might be part of the character problem though, because I never felt like he got too drunk in the book, other than like the party before in the chapter
Okay,
2.
no, but here's the thing: is he says that he got obsessively drunk. At no point does he act obsessively drunk.
That's true. And Jordan and him are dancing and they're having a good time.
Yeah,
and
like he's just like, okay, I'll have a good time at the party, but at no point is it like he's overly drunk like he was earlier. It was just like, okay, he's drinking throughout the night, but that doesn't mean that he's drunk.
In the book, he ends up at a table with another person who he doesn't know, and the person says, "I went to war with you," and it turns out to be Jay Gatsby, the owner of the house, who everyone's looking for. In the film, he runs into Gatsby, who serves him a drink. And I think this is where you get the meme, of course. The meme of Leonardo DiCaprio holding a drink up under fireworks.
Hey, Sebastien, toss it up if you're able to.
Yeah, the meme. The meme, everyone. The meme. It's the meme. I found the meme, everyone. It's the meme. So, they changed that a bit. And, Jordan gets called away like she does in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And Jay Gatsby tells her something, and she doesn't tell Nick anything, which is weird, because in the book she tells him another rumor about Gatsby. There's a bunch of rumors about Gatsby before we Gatsby, and it's really fun. Like, he's the Tsar of Germany, or like something like that. Like, he's a revenge killer.
Yeah, something like that. Like, he is
the
spy for some other nation. He is not the Tsar for Germany, because the Tsar's from Russia.
Like the brother of the leader of Germany or something.
Yeah, he's like the cousin or like nephew or something of like the leader of Germany, and it's just like, what? Like, nobody actually knows anything about him.
Now, we meet Gatsby, and Gatsby is very eccentric. He's very fun. I really like him. I think Leonardo DiCaprio does a great job in the introduction of Gatsby. Now, we've met Gatsby. The party ends. Nick goes home, and Nick's told, we're going to hang out more from Gatsby. So Nick and Gatsby are going to hang out more. They're going to go on a plane. We don't see the plane, mind you, but they're going to go on a plane.
But we don't see it in the book either.
Yeah.
It's just said, we're going to go. And it's like, okay.
And that, everybody, will end our episode. Now, we've only gone through 2 chapters, mind you. We have, like, a lot more to go. So 6 chapters to talk about next time we come back. But we've talked a lot today about the adaptation choices of Baz Luhrmann, where we feel like, yes, they followed the book, but that they follow the feeling of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the adaptation is the aesthetic choices of Baz Luhrmann overpowering the adaptation. And that is the question we're going to be asking ourselves next week when we come back to do the last bit of the show. That last bit of the film. Now, mind you, we are going to skip around a lot next week so we can get through the whole thing.
Yeah, but also keep in mind that this adaptation, as Stephen and I were saying, it does follow the book very well. So we decided that we're going to change up how we're talking about this, because otherwise it would just be, so they did this happens in the book. They did this happens in the book. And you would get very bored of that very quickly. And we were like, okay, let's bring something new to the table, just because, it's a different type of adaptation, and they have done a very good job in terms of following the source material. So we can look at some of the other aspects.
Now, we're hoping you enjoyed our discussion and our very in-depth view on The Great Gatsby, at least the first 3 chapters. And we'll be back for 6 more next week. We promise. We're going to have our question, and we promise we'll get through it all. So thank you so much, Ankit. It's always been a pleasure. As always. Thank you, Sebastien, our editor, and all of you wonderful listeners, watchers, people who have just discovered us for the first time. Thank you. Like, subscribe, do all the things. We hope to see you next week for the finishing of Great Gatsby and on to the next project. Woo. Bye, everyone.
See ya. Hello, and thank you so much for listening to this episode of Flip the Scripts. Flip the Scripts is created, hosted, and produced by Ankit Madhira and Stephen Nieman. Our editor is Sebastien Hollich. The art is by Kshitija Madhira, and the music is by Sebastien Hollich. If you like the video, you can click to listen to the next part, or if it's not out yet, you can find one of our previous episodes.
Or if you want to check out some of our other content, here's a fun video from another one of our shows.
Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, comment, and hit that bell icon to get notified of all of our content when it releases.
Subscribe to our Patreon if you want bonus content.
Links to all of our social media and Patreon are in the episode description down below.
Thank you for supporting our content. Come back next week for more shenanigans from Co-op Forge.
New episodes for Clip the Scripts release every Friday, Seattle Across the Pond every other Thursday, and post finale every Wednesday. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Bye now.